Welcome into the Yachts and Nautilus podcast post-game edition, the first one of the year. We've got 12, 13, 14 more of these to go. We'll see. Matt Prehm, Erik Skopil, Jared Mack on the show. Before we dive into breaking down Oregon's record-setting performance against Portland State, I want to remind you guys, go to duckterritory.com, 50% off a membership to the site right now. That gets you an annual membership for less than, I think, $44. You get all of the season. You get all of recruiting. You get all of men's and women's basketball. You get all of baseball, spring football, and then all of summer football recruiting leading up to next year. So, it was $53.70. So it's off a little bit, but still a huge savings, 50% off that. You get CBS Paramount, which is a huge add-on as well. So dive into that today. That's the most impactful way to support this podcast too. All right. We're back from Watson Stadium. 45,000 people was the announced attendance. The official number, 45,723 people. They saw Oregon set a record performance, 81 total points for the Ducks. That is the highest point total in the modern era of Oregon football. The 74-point margin is the highest it's been in the modern era of Oregon football. And here's the stat for you guys.
Okay.
It's the fourth most all time in program history, and the most since a win in 1916 over Willamette, which is now considered a D3 school. Nice. When they won by 97 points.
Not surprised. I mean, I guess I'm surprised. I didn't know anything about what was happening 108 years ago, or 107 years ago. But that felt like it should be a record-setting performance.
Yes. Okay, 81-7, 729 yards total offense for the Ducks, just 200 for the Vikings. What is it here? 52 total pass yards. I mean, I think all three of us were in curious mode, at least, of like, what's Oregon's pass defense going to look like against the Vikings? None of us were going to say they were going to get torched or anything, but I don't know if anyone was expecting 52 total passing yards. I think 8 total completions. And even Dan, I think, gave out a comment like, we weren't really tested at all through the air by Portland State. So real quick, I guess, what are we most impressed by? The 729 total yards and 81 total points by Oregon's offense, or the 200 total yards and 7 total points by the defense?
Couple good choices, both. I mean, it was a very dominant performance, and like as we were talking, as we were walking back to the car, like we all predicted. I predicted a 50-point win. I think you guys had 46-point wins, and we were still like very far off in the margin. And none of us, I think I said, like, if it would have felt disrespectful to come on a podcast and predict a team to win 81-7. So none of us said that, and none of us really, I think, thought that was a super likely outcome. But it was super dominant on both sides of the football. Like, Oregon scored a touchdown, I think, on their first 9 drives of the game. And ended up scoring a field goal on their 10th, and then I think another touchdown on their 11th. I don't think they were stopped in terms of scoring. You guys can correct me if I have the drive chart wrong on that. But I mean, there was really not a lot of opposition. No, I got that correct. And then they scored a touchdown on their final drive. They had 13 drives, 12 of them end up in scoring. That works.
That'll do.
And then defensively, like, there was basically one bad sequence, and Dan talked about it in post game. There were a couple of guys who made, I don't remember the terms he used, but just made mistakes that allowed the Vikings to move it down the field. They paid it off with a touchdown, led to a lot of message board and social media chatter about how terrible Oregon's defense was. And then Jared, you might have this, but after that, Portland State gained like 100 yards after that 175-yard drive. I mean, they really stepped it up. I don't
even think it's 100, Erik, looking at the numbers.
Well, it's over 100. If they had 200 total yards, then minus 75, it's 125. They had 7 yards in their first sequence, so 118 total yards after that one drive. And how many drives do they have? 13. So
pretty good.
118 yards and 12 drives is pretty good. That's not bad.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a whole lot else to say in terms of what was most impressive. I think all of it. We didn't see a lot of special teams, but that's a good thing in terms of there's one punt at the very end of the game. It was a good punt. It wasn't by the puncher we thought it would be. It was Ross James, not Luke Dunn. But I mean, I think James Crepia said in the post, we were chatting with him afterwards that Tez Johnson has already surpassed Chris Hudson's total punt return yardage from a season ago in the first game. So I kind of, aside from one sort of iffy defensive sequence, I don't really know what you're going to gripe about. I'm sure there'll be people on the message board that'll find some things. I'll be curious to see what they are.
I think this is very clearly the offense that was most impressive. Like Erik went through, none of us really came close to guessing Oregon's appropriate score here. 38 first downs. I mean, Matt said, over 700 yards of total offense. I think what was most impressive is how little time it took for Oregon to just march down the field. And again, this is against Portland State. This was a bad team that I don't think is going to do favorably well in their conference this year. I mean, they were 3-7 last year. But again, the longest drive of the day was 5 minutes and ended in a field goal. They scored touchdowns going over 50 yards or 60 yards and under 2.5 minutes, under a minute and a half. They just moved the ball down the field. And it was very reminiscent of last year's offense. And I think that's good. You always want to come out of the first game of the season, especially against an FCS opponent, and just dominate them. And that's exactly what Oregon did. They didn't leave any question marks. Again, there was the one drive by Portland State where Dan literally blamed two people for it. He didn't mention them by name, but he said two guys messed up or missed their assignment or made a mistake. And he reiterated that again later on in the press conference, saying that two guys made a mistake. So if it was just...
I hope you're not one of those two guys.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Well, we might be able to tell by who's starting or who's playing next week against Texas Tech. But that was the one real mistake on defense. There was probably another potential mistake, like Kamari Terrell got burnt one time, but it was just a terrible pass from Sachere, but who was getting under pressure. If you're Oregon's defense, you're looking for more tackles for loss, maybe some more sacks, but really Portland State just stopped trying for the second half of the game. Maybe they didn't stop trying, but they pulled the starters. I mean, they had a minute left in the second half.
I was going to say,
so that was really all you really needed to watch to see how this game was so lopsided. Yeah, the white flag. But I just came away more impressed with the offense. Will Stein, first year on the job at Oregon. Bo Nix seems to absolutely grasp the offense, has complete control of it, understands what to do. The offensive line was never tested. Running backs did well. I think the offense will continue to fire on all cylinders this year. This just kind of reiterated that. There were some question marks just of what it would look like, and it looks just like what players and coaches have been telling us. Very similar to last season. A lot of quick hitters, a couple of deep shot opportunities, but just a really well orchestrated offense from every perspective today.
Yeah, Bo Nix threw for 287, 3 touchdowns. 11 different players caught a pass. The team threw for 381 yards. And then the Ducks ran for 348. And then Bucky led the team with just 4 carries. Jared hit this one right on the nose in our player predictions. 4 carries, 119 yards, and 2 total touchdowns. Jordan James had 3 touchdowns as well. Let's start with the first possession of the game, or the first play of the game, as the next segue here. This was a game where we walked in thinking, hey, we're going to learn a lot about who fits where, who plays where, what the depth chart could potentially look like. And snap 1, everything kind of got thrown upside down because of a bunch of different locations of where guys were playing. We had some kind of idea based off of, which was a shock to me, like a legitimate depth chart presented to the media ahead of time. But it actually kind of was true to form of what they presented on the field. But there were some weird players all over the place. Were you guys more surprised offensively or defensively? It's got to be defense, right?
Defense,
It's like easy.
Yeah, of course.
No, not a question.
Yeah. No, I'll just run through them right now. So a lot different than my projected depth chart. Oregon put basically 5 edge or defensive linemen as edge rushers on the field: Jake Shipley, Jordan Burch, Taki Taimani, Casey Rogers, and Amarion Winston. And then linebackers were Jeffrey Bassa and Bryce Betcher, 2 sports star Bryce Betcher, walk-on Bryce Betcher, mind
your guy.
And then my guy, Bryce Betcher, mind you. And then the 4 defensive backs were Dante Manning, Brian Addison, Taishim, and Kyrie Jackson. Just a lot of surprises. I think the only guys that were shoe-ins to me were Jordan Burch, Casey Rogers, Jeffrey Bassa, Taishim Johnson, and Kyrie Jackson. Other than that, I've had many different players in my projected depth chart. I thought we would see a significant amount of more snaps from Jamal Hill, from Shrekwes Bridges, from Brandon Dorlus, whose first snap didn't come until the second quarter, the very start of the second quarter. We got a good amount from the interior guys like Keon Ware-Hudson and Popo. Well, Popo actually not that many, but in a game like this, you don't really need to stress at all. Amarion Winston played a lot, and Matt, that's going to be your guy, but that was a surprise. Just the starters on defense was very interesting. Oregon forced a 3-and-out on their first drive on the defensive side, and genuinely, I didn't watch any of it because I was still like typing away because I did not anticipate this at all in terms of their defensive starters. So I think that's clearly the more surprising side of the ball. But offense had a surprise or two.
Yeah, it did. Defense, it was every level. It was like, oh, that's happening?
Yeah.
Didn't think that was the case. This is what happens when we don't get to watch much practice. We are as surprised as everybody else. Like, if we had seen 11-on-11, who knows? Bryce Betcher might have been one of the starters all fall. We have no idea. That was really cool that he started, by the way. A local kid, walk on, 2 sports star. Jared has a great, I know it's your pinned tweet on Twitter. If you want to read a little bit more and learn about Bryce, you can find that on Jared's, I guess, X account. Is that what we're saying now? It feels weird, but yeah.
I'm not. No, yeah, my Twitter account.
Yeah. Twitter account.
It's also linked in the instant reaction story. I linked to that story as well in the instant reactions on duckterritory.com. So
nice. Offensively, it was a little more straightforward. I'd say the skill stuff was all basically what you expected, with the exception of Patrick Herbert was the first to line up out there. And I had predicted Trayshawn Holden over Gary Bryant. That did not take place. Gary was the starting Z, played really, really well. We'll get into some of the offensive standouts, but I thought he was certainly one of them. And then the offensive line, I think, is basically exactly what I predicted, with the exception of Harper being there. And I don't know if it's totally fair to say, but Nishad Strother was not available in this game. So that makes it a little less clear of like who would have actually been the starting left guard if everyone was available. But the offense is, I would say, like 9 of the 11 guys were there and in spots I thought they would be. So not a ton to take away that was surprising. Certainly not like defense, but as the game wore on, we can get into some of that as we go here. There were certainly some, oh, that guy hasn't seen the field at all today, or oh, that guy's on the field before this guy. Certain things like that surprised us. But from a starter's perspective, I'd say that was a little bit more in line with what we thought it would be.
Should we go through guys who didn't see the field today?
Yes, because there was also some surprises here. I know the participation chart says he played, but Erik and I have talked about it. We don't remember him ever playing. I don't think Jared's ever seen him play either. Noah Whittington. That's where I'm going to start it here. That was a big surprise and a big revelation of just also how far along Jordan James has come. A guy that was a short yardage back usage last year turned into a really good player this season, at least the first game of the year. But Noah Whittington, he apparently played on the opening kickoff, and then we never saw him again. Dan was asked about him and said he's not going to talk about players who didn't play, and he's got the best interest for those guys, and their status moving forward. And he said he's not in I can't remember his exact wording, but he said like he's in a good place. He's I think he's implying he's not suspended. But weird that Whittington didn't play when he was a top 5 offensive player for Oregon, top 10 offensive player for Oregon last season as a non-starter.
Certainly one of the more important guys. And like, I am going to do a full rewatch shortly after we finish this, and I'll watched that opening kickoff, and like it's possible he took a hit or something happened there, and maybe they just held him out for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I
But
just watched it.
did you see anything?
He took a big old hit like right away, like at the 25-yard line. Just
so that adds up
full
more.
speed right into somebody else who was going full speed. So he was out there. Us personally did not see them. Rob Mosley of Go Ducks saw him. So he played. But upon further review, it looks like he got dinged.
Yeah. So that actually makes me feel a teensy bit better about the situation, that it looks like there was some sort of thing that took place during the game, because it was very perplexing to follow. Other guys, do we want to run some other guys? And we'll see with Noah. We'll have to see what his practice participation is this week. I doubt Dan will say much of anything about his availability,
right?
But that's par for the course. We'll get a sense, at least from practice, if he's out there on Tuesday and Wednesday. So come back and check it out here. We'll kind of provide the lowdown. Matt, do we want to run through some other guys that were kind of surprising absences? Because there were several.
Yeah,
guys.
I mean, Mace Funa was the big one of the big ones defensively. He warmed up in pads, and then when they came out of the tunnel the final time, he was not in pads.
Yep.
We saw him with shutout Noah Sewell on the sideline. He was hidden. Funa was with him quite a bit on the sideline. Brandon Dorless he dressed up. He played in the game, but he didn't see any action in the first quarter. And multiple times I kept looking to make sure it was right. Like even when the defense was on the field, he had no helmet. There was no helmet near him. And then the first play of the second quarter, Oregon was on defense and Brandon Dorless was out there on the field. We did not see Evan Williams play in this game.
Surprise.
Yep, that was a big one. He was like the one guy we were like confident was going to play or start, I should say.
Yeah,
in the defensive backfield. But he had a hand on his brace on his hand, which I think is new, right? Like we haven't seen.
No, he's had that for a couple of weeks.
He has had it, but I think that looked.
But he's practiced.
He's practiced. Yeah,
he's gone full go.
And then.
Well, Chris Hudson's another one that.
Yeah.
I don't
last year a full-time starter, and I couldn't find him on the sideline. I don't know if you guys saw him or not.
Pre-game, we did. But
during the game, I couldn't find him on the sideline. So he was hidden. Yeah. He wasn't in uniform, I don't think.
And he's not on the participation chart at all. Casey Kelly didn't play. Oregon had 3 scholarship. Actually, they just had 3 tight ends. I didn't even dress Caden Ludwig, I don't think, which was interesting. So they just had 3 guys out there. Some freshmen didn't play. We could run through that later if we want. But I think the Hudson thing is another one of those where he's been available all fall in practice when we've watched. We thought he was going to be at least one of the top 5 guys. At least I felt like he would. Didn't play. Don't have an explanation. Dan didn't want to get into that. We'll see what happens this week in practice. And then the bigger question is, does he play against Texas Tech? So I don't know. There's a couple of these where you're just kind of left going, don't have an answer. Justin Jacobs also did not play, notably. I'm trying to think. Was there another?
Tatum Tuioti dressed but didn't play.
And that was a surprise that he was in uniform.
Yep. Tavita Pomey, who we've been not seeing at practice, and we've been talking about our practice reports, did not dress, did not play. Nishad Strother didn't dress, didn't play, was out there, no sling. So maybe that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
That's it from. I think that's it from my end. I mean, we can go through
there's a couple
5 freshmen who didn't play because they played 24 members of their 2023 recruiting class and 23 true freshmen, not including George Silva. But we can go through that real quick.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, here are the 5 guys who didn't play from the 23 class: Colin Gill, Tavita Pomey, like I just mentioned, Bryce Bolton, JR or JP? Is it JR Moala?
JR is on the staff. He's like a recruiting guy. It's Lipe Moala is on the team.
Yeah.
And then Tuioti.
There we go. Yeah, I think that's about it from an absence perspective. Oh, and Ashton Cozart. We need to.
Yeah, that was another one that I don't think we're expecting him to be like a regular contributor, but I thought he'd at least play considering the opponent they were going to play, and he he didn't snip the field either. Which
he didn't dress, and Oregon played 81 players.
He did dress.
Game. He did. Oh, that's right. You saw him later. We didn't see him in warmups.
Yeah.
We didn't see him in warmups, but Jared did see him during the game on the sideline. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Do we want to go into guys though that like we thought were in interesting spots? We talked a little bit about this defensively, offensively. Mm-hmm. I guess you want me to go first, or who wants to go first?
Go for it.
Sure. Marion Winston got a start at one of the outside linebacker edge positions. I was trying to think all pregame. Like, did anyone really like shout him out? Did he get talked about like as a guy that's performing? His name hardly came up if at all during fall camp. Maybe that's our fault as the members of the media for not asking about every single player on the team. But it's
a lot to ask of us, to ask of every single guy.
I mean, we try. But, we ask about a lot of dudes.
Zero mention of him, and he comes out and starts. And you look at the stats, and
he didn't have any.
He didn't have. I was going to say I don't see him listed, but like I also didn't feel like it was. Oh wow! Like this is a throwaway start that he's just getting, and then he won't play ever again the rest of the season. It's just because Portland State and injuries are happening or whatnot. But like he wasn't like an unbelievable player, but at the same time, like he fit. Maybe he was one of those guys that made the mistake early in the game. We'll have to go back and watch that. But just that was one that was just totally out of left field. I don't think anyone ever expected him to be a regular contributor for this game, and he started, which was unique.
I think I'll have to rewatch this, or maybe it won't teach me anything anyway. But I do think they rotated a ton with certain personnel groups, and I think it's possible. Like he played a ton, so I don't want to take anything away. I think it's possible they were in a specific personnel package to start the game. That put him on the field. Because if you watched it closely, they really rotated.
Yeah, they did rotate like a couple guys off right before the play started.
They did that, and then those edge guys rotated situationally. It felt like quite a bit. Like they had times
all
where
the time.
Jordan Birch and Brandon Dorleth standing as like massive guys on the outside. They also had a lot of Blake Purchase and Mateo Uiagalelei on passing downs, which was a fun combo. But it was weird. It was interesting. Jake Shipley and Amarian Winston starting as your two outside linebackers was not something anybody would have predicted. That's for sure. Jared, why don't you keep it on defense, and I'll finish with a couple offensive thoughts.
Sure. Purchase was a guy. He played a lot, like a lot, and maybe that's because of Mace Funa's injury or whatever he's dealing with that he didn't play today. Maybe it's not, and it's probably not an injury. But he played a lot, way more than I had anticipated. Even though I'm a big Blake Purchase guy. Him and Shipley, I think, got the starts because of Mace's non-playing. But he didn't record any stats, but he lined up in a bunch of different positions. He was a lot of outside linebacker, but they at points, sometimes on third down, they moved him to like the Mike linebacker spot. Like he and Jeffrey Bassa were right next to each other, and the other linebacker who was on the field would move up to the line of scrimmage. Very strange, very interesting stuff that the defense did with their rotations and just their personnel units. Bryce Betcher, obviously, big stunner. He mentioned post game that he's really just kind of like one of the linebackers in 12 base personnel. I get the feeling that if Justin Jacobs were fully healthy, he would be starting the game, but Betcher would definitely get in there. He had 4 tackles and a fumble recovery. So it's not like he wasn't playing. It's not like he wasn't playing well. It's not like he was just out there for funds because he's a local kid. He actually made an impact in a brand new position. Like he played safety in the spring. He's only been playing linebacker for fall camp. Cole Martin, I had listed down here. Really couldn't tell where he was playing for most of the game. Looked like star for some, but also dropped into free safety. So I think he's exclusively a safety. And Coach Martin Demetrius, his father, talked about in high school that he moved to safety a lot during his senior season. So I think Oregon is probably keeping him on that track, which given his physique and body type, I think that actually might be the right call. He kind of reminds me of what Tysheem Johnson is, who Tysheem played well today. Dante Manning got the start at corner. Thought that was a big
surprise for me that he was there.
Yeah, big surprise. I have Bridges and Manning written down here just because I anticipated Kyrie Jackson and Trikweze Bridges to be starting corners, like undoubtedly.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this was kind of like a personnel set for 12 base because they had Taishim, Dante, and Kyrie, and Brian Addison. So maybe they're like more nickel safety bound. I'm not 100% sure what the reasoning is there. Shipley we went over, and then Bridges I just kind of went over as well. I'm trying to think if there's more guys off the top of my head. I don't think like Jamal Hill played a lot, which I thought was surprising because
Yeah.
I figured I kind of penciled him in as being the starter on this game, especially with Jacobs and his lack of practicing. Nico Reed looked like he only played star. He was beat on that slant route for a touchdown by Portland State, but came back like a drive or two later, and that same play happened, and he jumped the route and had a pass breakup, which looked nice. I think that's it. Other than like the defensive line rotations and positions were really interesting. Like Erik, you kind of briefly mentioned how they had Jordan Birch and Brandon Dorlus, like both standing on the opposite sides as true edge rushers. There was one time where they lined up on the same side of the offensive line or the same side of the defensive line. They had Birch on the edge, Dorlus at the defensive end spot, and they just destroyed whoever they were going against. So I think I've talked about this on the podcast. I've talked about it, or I've written about it in articles. I truly think that Dan and Tosh are going to have the pick of the litter on who they want at any given situation in terms of their personnel at almost every single position, and especially the defensive line. And I think that was the case today with how many guys they were rotating in and out at any given time during the first half. Just, hey, that kind of looks like they're in the run package today. All right, bring in the run guys. Like, oh, hey, it's third and long. Bring in the really fast guys off the edge, and we'll move Brandon Dorlus on the inside. Like, they have options, and I think it showed today. And I know there's no sacks and not a lot of tackles for loss about it, but they got to the quarterback. They had a couple hurries. They had a couple tackles for loss, but I think that in a more pass-friendly offense, I think they're getting to the quarterback a lot more because Portland State, I think, kind of gave up at points and was like, we're not going to risk Sachere getting injured here because he took a lick from Brandon Dorlus and from Casey Rogers at one point, and then from then on, they ran the ball a lot, and there were a lot of 3-and-outs.
Yeah, Portland State 8 for 20 passing, 52 yards. You'll take it. One thing I wish we had in these box scores is snap counts because I find those to be very interesting. I know Pro Football Focus will update those probably tomorrow, and we'll at least post what they have, and we'll talk about that on Monday's podcast perhaps. But I'm with you in terms of like it felt like certain guys. Not only was it surprising who started on defense, it was also surprising which guys played a ton. So that'll be something that'll be interesting to kind of look back in on rewatch and see if we can figure out why, and then look at the actual counts. Offensively, just a couple of things I scribbled down. Like we mentioned, Chris Hudson didn't get in. I was surprised. Jurian Dickey, I think, was wide receiver 7 in terms of playing today. Obviously the 3 starters we mentioned with Troy, Tez, and Gary, and then Trayshawn was on the field really early as well. And then Kyler Casper came out, looked like he had a touchdown, celebrated like he had a touchdown. Turns out he didn't have a touchdown, which was too bad. But that he was the 5th receiver on, and then Justice Lowe actually got on the field. I think after Trayshawn Holden kind of came up and was being a little ginger at one point, and they put Justice out there.
Yep.
So Jurian Dickey was actually receiver number 7, and Chris Hudson didn't play in this game. So you kind of go, does that mean Jurian's like receiver 8 right now? It's a little surprising, at least interesting, because he is the headliner of this recruiting class, a former 5-star recruit. He also got here in the fall, unlike a lot of the true freshmen who played a lot didn't. They were here in the spring. The running back rotation, we've already talked about the Noah Whittington thing, but the fact that it was like Bucky and Jordan exclusively in the first half, I guess if Noah's not available, that's not that big of a surprise, but that was kind of interesting. And then tight end, I mentioned it briefly earlier, Patrick Herbert being out there before Terrence Ferguson. I think one of the first plays of the game, he kind of showed a little bit more.
I was going to say Herbert looked a lot different than he did last year.
He looked more like the guy who I saw in high school like half a decade ago when he was at Sheldon. He was just like people who watched him in high school will remember Patrick Herbert was a guy, and I think a lot of people thought he'd have a much bigger contribution at Oregon. Injuries have gotten in the way. This looked more like the player I remember seeing in high school. There was a little bit more burst, a little more explosiveness. Thought he had a really nice sequence there. And then I guess on the offensive line, like they did a lot of rotating, but I thought it was kind of interesting that Poncho Iapani Lalalu was the second center to see the game or started to see the field. Didn't know if that would be the case. We'd heard great things about him all fall, but he was out there, I think, even in the first half in the second quarter.
Yeah, he was out there like the third or fourth possession of the game. I mean,
they gave him
not only was he the second center to play, I think he was the first offensive lineman to come off the bench and play.
I think he was, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mark that down, but yeah, and it was cool at times. He and his brother were both out there. Feope was playing left tackle. He was the second left tackle on the field. So there's just a lot of little pieces here. Probably not quite as interesting as some of the defensive stuff, but certainly some things that we hadn't anticipated would be the case, and that kind of stood out. And we should note, we'll get into some players that stood out. Ty Thompson and Austin Novosad both played, and I thought both looked about as good as you could expect.
Ty Thompson looked markedly better.
It's the best we've seen him, right?
Yes. And you also have it's Portland State. It's a team that's clearly outmatched. That has to factor into it. But just last year and the year before, it felt like when he got a bad snap, it was a panic, throw the ball just right into immediate coverage. And it's like, oh my God, why are you even throwing there? Where today, he had multiple poor snaps sent to him. He adjusted them on the fly and made some good plays. And he had a couple throws that were like, he went through his progressions, never really panicked, and made the plays that were needed. Like, he looked like a different player, whether that's only against FCS opponents to be seen, but at least you walk away being encouraged there.
Yeah, definitely encouraged. It was good to see. He was 7 of 8 today for, I think, 81 yards and a touchdown. He also ran it twice and kind of put down the shoulder a few times, which is good to see. He ran it twice for what was that, 25 yards? I was trying to pull this up. Go ahead, Jared.
I wanted to get to Ty running the ball. Like, we didn't see Bo attempt a single run. At least I'm looking at the score sheet, and he didn't attempt to run, and I remember it. Yeah, he didn't run at all, and I think that's purely by design, because why bother a potential injury with Bo Nix in the game against Portland State? When Ty tucked it and ran, I think that's what this offense is going to look like as well, especially with like next week. Like, don't be surprised if Bo Nix is tucking these RPOs, because there was absolutely no reason at all for Oregon to risk Bo Nix's legs in a random tackle against Portland State. But I thought it was encouraging though that Ty, they gave him full control of the offense. There was none of this, hey, we're going to run it on first and second down with the backup running back and the backup offensive lineman and all the backups, and you're going to be forced with a 3rd and 8, and everybody knows that we're throwing the ball. So good luck, Ty. They said, hey, here you go. Here's the full keys to the car. Here's the starting offensive line. Here's the starting wide receivers. Here's Jordan James, who's a pretty damn good running back in his own right. Go have fun. And he did. And he would have had 2 touchdown passes if he didn't have like a cut on his hand or whatever, and Austin Novosad came in. Or maybe they would have ran the ball. But still, it was good to see him out there, and like, he looked free. He looked like he wasn't overthinking this, kind of to Matt's point, where he just went out there and he threw. He went through went through the progressions and read them all and threw the guy who was open.
One thing that I really liked that we didn't see a lot, we haven't seen a lot the last, I think probably since Helfrich, is when Oregon got up big and they put their backup quarterback in. Typically, we've seen the offensive line maybe stay in, but all the skill guys get pulled out with the quarterback. Yeah. And it's dive, and next thing you know, it's now 3rd and 11, and here, throw a short dump off pass and see if you can convert a first down. That didn't happen today. You look at the first play when Ty came in, and it was a run to Jordan James, but then the second play was a designed run for Ty, like Jared was talking about, when he just looked different and looked good. He got 12 yards on that one for a first down, and then it went pass, run, pass for a touchdown. And then the second time he came in the game, they ran the ball once with Jordan James. They did the designed run again with Ty Thompson, and then it went pass, run, pass, pass. Like, they legitimately kept the first team out there, everybody except for Bo, and then operated the offense as if Bo was in there. And we were able to see what Ty could do with that, and it was good.
I just wanted to provide, and I don't know if this is necessary or not. This just the context of Ty has actually performed well against FCS competition in the past. It's just been against FBS competition. Maybe I shouldn't be going through this, but I was just running through the numbers. He is against FCS teams coming into this game. He was 11 of 16 passing with 2 touchdowns and like 8 yards per pass attempt. So that's all pretty solid. In games against FCS competition, let me do quick mental math here for 6. He was 7 for 19 with 0 touchdowns and 3 picks. So this was really encouraging. This is what you wanted to see. Obviously, this is everything you hoped it would be from him today. Like I would, again, as I said earlier, best he's looked. Let's see what he looks like if he gets in against Hawaii in a couple of weeks, or maybe Stanford or somebody like that, just a couple of weeks down the line, just to see what it looks like. But this checks all the boxes you would like to have seen today for sure.
All right. Anything else that's hard hitting? I think we've kind of covered everything. Injuries. I mean,
didn't see
the only one that we know is we left Austin saying no one walked off with an injury. Now we know with our own eyes that Noah Whittington did, but that's kind of the only one from the guy that participated in the game. Obviously, there's other ones that didn't play, and those are certainly ones we're going to have to figure out down the road. But it looks like maybe just Noah Whittington is the only one that dealt with an injury, which is one player. I think that's a solid outcome.
Very
Never
solid
for injuries, but only one guy getting kind of injured is a positive.
Yeah, and honestly, across the board, several key guys didn't play, but this team is in better shape than you would maybe expect. The only other thing I just wanted to follow up on was, I mentioned it earlier, I thought Gary Bryant had a really nice game. It was good to see that. 7 catches, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. We didn't know exactly what the hierarchy would be. We don't know what Chris Hudson's status is and why he didn't play. But Gary played a really good game, and both true freshman running backs, we should mention, also found the end zone, which was fun.
Gary caught all targets thrown to him. 7 times he was targeted. He caught all 7, which is a pretty good indication of how the quarterback's playing, but also how he was playing.
Quarterbacks were 33 for 38 for 381 yards and 4 touchdowns in this game. We'll take it. We'll take it.
Yes.
Good day for Camden Lewis.
Yeah.
11 kickoffs, 8 touchbacks, 41-yard field goal. Good special team stuff. We already went through Tez, tying Chris Hudson from last year in terms of punt return yards. I think that's definitely been a missing piece in Oregon's special teams the last couple of years, is a guy that they can rely on to be a punt returner. It's kind of been a revolving door. Tez fielded 5 of them. He was the only guy to go back there. So I think that's their number one dude. Ross James, like we talked about, 58-yard punt, only punt of the day for Oregon. So that was good. I think that's about it.
Solid performance. Pretty good performance. All right, it's going to do it for us here on this post-game edition. We'll be back on Monday. Enjoy your Labor Day. We'll have another podcast for you then, breaking down. Actually, it's the mailbag. We'll have the mailbag on Monday, and then Tuesday we'll be back breaking down Dan Lanning's comments, player comments, ahead of Texas Tech week as the Red Raiders are winning 17-0 in the first quarter up in Wyoming. Until then, though, you've been listening to the Odds and Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.